The trees around the clearing stood tall and close together. They were straight and narrow, their trunks splitting only in a Y-shaped pair of branches that continued to shoot straight up. Their bark was white and their long, feathery leaves a fiery orange. Filaments of the same color blanketed the ground. A dark-haired woman stood in the clearing, with a group of small creatures crowding at her feet. They looked like bald, overgrown, obese rabbits. She was tossing gnarled little sticks at them, which the critters slurped up with the long proboscis that flexed and probed erratically. Stubby antennae twitched where their eyes should have been. The woman turned to face the approaching transport. She was short and slender, with markedly Asian features. One of the sources for the strange mind-pull effect that Aaron had been able to sense from the very top of the cliff was embodied in this woman. The platform landed smoothly, like sinking in thick molasses. Its arrival sent the whole group of fat, rubbery creatures scrambling away among teeny, buzzing noises. They burrowed underneath the mantle of filaments, hid behind trees, disappeared into the copse. The handrail fell to pieces shortly after, and Diego stepped off without preamble. Aaron would have followed, but his stumbled thoughts needed a moment to find their footing. It had been a silent and extremely short ride, but every second of it had been instructive. His attention had been split between unsettling realizations and the white-knuckled effort of holding on to the rail. They had accelerated at a constant rate for half of the trip, then decelerated during the second half. The world had seemed to blur at peak speed, and at that moment Aaron had realized that there was no drag against the wind. The disc had seemed to move through a completely alien medium, as if there was no air at all to displace. It had felt ethereal, like wading through a substance that was neither solid, liquid, nor gas, a smooth plasma that slid around him like water on grease. It was a subtle thing, and he wasn't surprised not to have noticed until then. The woman's gestures brought him back to the present. She had tossed aside the rest of the sticks and was brushing flakes off her high-collared red blouse and silky white skirt. Rebel wisps of hair curled free from the loose bun at the back of her head. She regarded their arrival with a benevolent smile. Her face was long and narrow, a soft triangle with pleasant curves and high cheekbones. Like Santana, her age appeared to be somewhere between 30 and 50. There was a certain agelessness to them, which Aaron found refreshingly logical. Why would anyone age in the afterlife? She looked Santana up and down as he stepped off the disc, a twinkle in her almond-shaped eyes. Always such a show-off, Diego. She gestured at Aaron with a tilt of her chin. Trying to impress a wide-eyed youth? Did you get all the odd deference you were hoping for? Santana stopped mid-stride, eyebrows raised. He opened his mouth to protest, but the woman spoke again before he did. I'm just teasing you, my friend, but do change into something less gaudy, will you? You'll have the child thinking we're all magicians. Her voice was deep and smooth, defying Aaron's expectations. He looked back at Santana, anticipating irritation, but the man was simply shaking his head, smiling. There's nothing wrong with creating a sense of mystique, he said, glancing back at his charges as he casually walked over to his side. Might as well entertain while providing a service. But it will be as you say, Ming-Xue. No sooner had he uttered the words than his clothing rippled and shifted, his frame becoming a blurred shape. A moment later, his clothes had turned into an entirely different outfit. Aaron stared at him, eyes wide but mouth carefully shut. Santana's attire was now a simple brown shirt and honest-to-goodness breeches, of the kind that had been out of fashion for at least 2 centuries. He showed no intention of offering an explanation or even making introductions. The woman patted him on the shoulder, sparing only a warm glance at the steward before returning her attention to Aaron. He got the clear impression that her eyes, dark and heavily tilted, did not miss a single one of his movements. I understand your surprise, young man, she said. Don't worry, we will share everything we know with you, although you must be patient for your own sake. I officially welcome you to Eternal. You may approach if you wish. Eternal. So that's how they call it. Aaron stepped off the platform, doing his best not to look as apprehensive as he felt. Quag was already sprawling on the ground, bowing even lower than he had before. Still smiling affably, the woman closed the distance in a few steps, her skirt flowing around her ankles in a curious fashion, like dancing with a breeze that was there only for her benefit. She offered a hand to him, palm down. I am Ming Xie, friend. I lead our small gathering here in Thousand Rivers. What is your name? Aaron took her hand in his and wondered what to do with it. He felt the urge to kneel before this woman. For all her earthy demeanor, there was something regal about her, a certain aura of command. Did she expect him to kiss it? Make a leg? Maybe he should knuckle his forehead. He settled for an apologetic smile and an awkward handshake. I'm Aaron Gretchen, your, ma'am. I almost called her Your Majesty. Way to look like an idiot in front of their boss. She stared for a moment, her hand going limp in his grip, but soon her smile showed a hint of understanding. Ah, a modern one, I see. Western, yes? European? American? She nodded in satisfaction with Aaron's assent at the latter. Your clothes betray as much. You are exceptionally calm, Aaron Gretchen. It isn't common for one as young as yourself. Oh, I figure I might as well take things in stride. Truly the best attitude to confront your situation. You must tell me your story, Aaron. Only then will I be able to help you, and hopefully instruct you in our ways. She glanced at Quag, whose tentacles were still spread all over the floor. You may arise, 14th Quag Remora. You will be dealt with shortly. Aaron couldn't decide whether it was a promise or a threat. Come, she said to him, withdrawing her hand and gesturing toward a path leading off the clearing. Let us walk as we speak. It will help you feel more at ease. She started down the path at a leisurely pace, clearly expecting him to keep up. He hesitated for a moment, then moved to follow. Quag and Diego kept a pace not far behind, the man at a casual saunter, the alien knight reverent in his demeanor. Actually, Aaron said, doing his best to ignore the unease in his gut, I'd like to ask something first, if you don't mind. I've been trying to find my wife. Has anyone else showed up around here recently? Ming Xie cringed faintly, then gave him a sympathetic look. You died together, didn't you? An accident? Aaron shook his head. Not really. An explosion, sort of. War, if it was what I think it was. As he said it, he caught sight of a fat little pig-rabbit monster peeking behind a tree trunk. It was gone in a blink. Ming Xie was studying him, thoughtful. You are the first newborn we have received in a very long time, I'm afraid. Share your story with us. We will help you. Aaron let out a deep breath, his brow furrowed. It couldn't be that easy, I guess. All right, he said. Should I start at showing up in this place, or before that? As far back as you feel comfortable with. The ever-present smile turned slightly awry. You will learn soon enough that we have nothing if not time. You may tell us of your journey here, starting at the moment of your arrival. If you don't object, we can also talk about your life, the world you come from, and the events that led to your departure. Oh, okay. I don't mind, no. Though it's pretty boring stuff, honestly. She nodded agreeably. Share with us what you will, Aaron. All right, well, let's see. I was born in Gainesville, Florida, 1990. Grew up there. Graduated high school, pretty uneventful. Lost my parents to a car crash in the first year of college. It was no fun, but even then I knew it had been a long time coming. My father, you see. He made a half-hearted drinking gesture. Ming Xie nodded in understanding. Anyway, I got a degree in physics, eventually. I met my wife online before graduating. No dating service or anything, we just stumbled upon one another. You could say I stalked her for a while. A fond grin had made its way to Aaron's lips. Then I moved to Seattle to marry her, or trick her into marrying me, depending who you ask. He shook his head at the thought. It worked out somehow. She got lucky with an opening at the museum. I got a job with an insurance company and made it to claims manager. Would have rather worked in my field, but hey, it was pretty good money. We saved enough to get a nice little house with a nice fenced backyard where she likes to practice her forms. A small pause. His fond expression dropped into neutral bleakness. Liked, I guess. And then... well, then we blew up. Aaron took a few more absent steps before realizing that Ming-Xue was no longer walking at his side. He turned his head to see her standing still, her eyes widened slightly, her fine eyebrows lifted just a bit. Queg and Santana stood quietly behind her, by all appearances entirely disengaged from the conversation. The feathery canopy above them rustled subtly, even in the complete absence of wind. When she spoke again, Ming-Xue seemed to give thought to every word. Did you die on the 23rd of July, year 2021 of the Gregorian calendar? Aaron eyed her in a state of bewilderment. Yeah, I think so. It was Sunday. Friday had been the 21st. Yeah, that's today's date. She hesitated for a moment, mouth pressed down to a fine line. Then she gestured for them to resume their walk. This isn't normally discussed until much later, once your mind has had a chance to adapt and start to become free of the trappings that bind it. However, it is a common exception to be made, since about 1 in 100 newborns share your circumstances. A significant portion of the modern population died that day. She studied his expression with mild interest. You don't seem as disturbed by the idea as would be expected. Aaron looked away, pursing his lips. It looked bad. I hoped it was just Seattle. Far from it. 2021 was the beginning of an irreversible path to extinction. You, my friend, were witness to the pinnacle of human civilization, and fell victim to the terrible first blow in the war that ended it all. Wait, the whole world? You can't tell me 8 billion people got exterminated just like that, new bombs or not. After all the retaliations and countermeasures, the plasma destroyed 2/3 of the population. What it did to the weather, the soil, and the water finished us off over the span of a miserable century. A few hardy survivors made it past that time in remote or sheltered areas, but they too succumbed in the end. She shrugged, wistful. Another brief sigh of life expired from the universe. All species meet that fate, sooner or later. Aaron's frown deepened. It sounds more like myth than historical account, to be honest. Even the worst plasma bombs couldn't ignite more than a 40-mile radius before running out. You'd need one at every population center in the world to kill that many people at once. I don't think there were enough bombs in the world to do that. They were barely past testing stages, for goodness sake. Ming-Xue was shaking her head. More conventional weapons were used as well. Events are well documented by thousands of different accounts, Aaron. You can debate motivations and methods at a later time if you wish, with others that can claim deeper knowledge than I on the matter. She looked him in the eye and spoke in a taut voice that allowed for no contest. The outcome is still the same, regardless. His frown remained, although he made an effort not to come off as contrary. You talk about it as if it's all in the past, but it can't be more than a day since I got here. Her smile returned, slightly enigmatic, knowing. Past tense is mostly convention. Space-time is a curious thing. But that will come later. Do tell me of your journey here, please. But... She raised a forestalling hand. Have patience, Aaron. All the knowledge we can offer will be yours in time. There is absolutely no hurry. In fact, too much at once is counterproductive and often dangerous. She paused briefly to let it sink in. Now, if you please. He wanted to be stubborn and keep pointing out the dubious likelihood of her tale, but then he remembered where he was and who these people were. They could refuse to answer any and all of his questions if they felt like it. They could stuff him in a magic box made out of the rock beneath his feet and throw him into a river for all he knew. He was literally at their mercy. Aaron swallowed his insistence and nodded. Okay, so after everything faded away, suddenly I was myself again and I was falling. He continued his story, telling her of his appearance in some random corner of the pathways, his chance meeting with Queg and the trip to the realm interface. He praised Queg's flawless performance as a guide, mentioned the herd of massive monsters, which, oh, by the way, they're coming down the road. And the ordeal of getting past the horrifying sentries. What the hell is that about, anyway? Ming-Xue deflected every question that Aaron raised, displaying an impressive array of variations on the phrase, "We will talk about it later." Aaron took the woman at her word, for lack of a better choice. Then we saw Mr. Santana, Diego. We saw Diego approach. He took us on his rocky cone of marvels to meet you, and here we are. The telling didn't take as long as he thought it would. He found it several orders of magnitude less awe-inspiring than he remembered it. "You are a fortunate man, Aaron Gretchen," Ming-Xue said. "There are much worse places to integrate than the pathways." She glanced over at where Queg was floating. "Much worse creatures to encounter besides our good friend here." "Ah," Aaron said. "I guess I should be glad." He pressed his lips together. "Sorry if I seem insistent, but maybe you know what might have happened to my wife. Her name is Alexandra, if it helps any." Ming-Xue briefly looked at him and kept a thoughtful silence. They continued walking through the forested path, her steps precise, her poise dignified. Their feet stirred the fluffy mantle underfoot like paddles making eddies in water. The woman finally spoke, worry creasing her brow. "I am sorry, child. I do not relish giving this news. It doesn't get any easier with experience." She breathed a small sigh and looked up at him. Her expression alone brought a stab of dread to Aaron's gut. "I will tell you the simple truth, Aaron. I am sorry to say there is little to no chance for our reunion. A scant few of those who transcend into the afterlife ever make it to human domains. She could be anywhere in eternal, or nowhere at all." There was honest sorrow in her voice, as if she felt Aaron's loss in her bones. His steps slowed bit by bit until he came to a full stop. "Wait," he said numbly. "What?" "I know it's difficult to accept." She placed a hand on his arm, fingertips lightly grazing his shoulder. "Many of us have gone through similar grief. I am sorry, Aaron." "What? Are you telling me?" His voice barely went past a whisper. "Are you saying she might not even be here?" Ming-Xue nodded solemnly, and her smooth voice felt like a soft blanket choking his throat. "There are very few of us, taking into account the thousands of adult lives that expired every day on Earth. Theories abound, but it is certain that a significant percentage doesn't survive integration for a number of causes. Anything from a hostile environment to cohabitation with already existing matter. It is also conjectured that many, perhaps a majority, don't even come here at all. You are exceptionally fortunate to have come the way you did." Her response rang hollow in his ears. He was lost in the memory of Alexandra's voice, a purring drawl in the black of night. "You're such a smart ass." Her smile brushes against my chest. "I'm just saying, there's a chance I could be wrong. Couldn't you be wrong?" Aaron squeezed his eyes shut. Everything was wrong. "You don't sound sure of anything." His voice was flat, somber. "There's a good chance that she's out there somewhere, right?" "There is a chance. And that's part of the problem, Aaron. Eternal is infinite as far as we know, and she could be anywhere. At best, she's a single speck of dust in a storm. She might not even be there at all. You simply cannot fathom the breadth of this existence." His hands balled into fists. His stomach felt about to sick up. "Why? How does that even work? Why me and not her? Why you people and not her?" She shook her head. "There are only theories. You'd expect billions of us in the afterlife, but we're barely over 1,000,000, less than most other sapiens. Our numbers have grown with... I don't care about your numbers. I just want my wife back." He didn't want to be angry, but the words came out unbidden. Ming-Xue must have reacted in some way, but Aaron's mind couldn't be farther from the woman standing at his elbow. "I just want..." "Are you crying? The movie wasn't even good. You've been griping about it the whole time. You're such a softie." A void drained inside his chest, giving the memories a bitter taste, giving his longing a set of sharp teeth that sank deep into his neck. "We were in the same spot," Aaron said, mostly to himself. "It makes no sense. Why didn't she show up with me?" She looks at me, amusement in her eyes. Maybe there is no explanation at all. Maybe some things simply are. Is it such a terrible thing for your big brain to swallow? I stare for a moment, trying to decide whether she's serious. Sometimes she'll goad me into fluster ranting just for the fun of it, and I fall for it every single time. She goes back to chopping up vegetables for the salad, a smile playing on her lips. "There is always a reason," I tell her, as if she doesn't know already. She expects me to get worked up. Who am I to disappoint her? Even for the strangest things, we're just blind to it sometimes. The sounds of conversation behind him banish the image of Alexandra leaning over the kitchen counter. "I can also grant you limited access to the archives," Ming-Xue was saying, "or sustenance for several portents in a caretaker reservation of your choice." "I aspire to risen status, Your Grace." "I see. Yet you have failed to preserve this mind from harm. Can you be counted on to adhere to the protocol?" "He has many questions, Your Grace. He required answers and would not follow without them." Quek glanced at Aaron in his peculiar eyeless way, all but wringing his tentacles with anxiety. "I did my best to respect the protocol I was taught. I could not—" He cut off immediately at her peremptory hand gesture. "You spoke of us, of the nature of humanity. Do you deny this?" "He didn't," Aaron butted in, remembering his promise. His voice wavered, but he managed to get it under control. "I tried to pry things out of him, but he wouldn't budge. He managed to get me here with barely any information, just enough for me to trust him. If he says something he shouldn't, it's my fault." Ming-Xue turned and eyed Aaron evenly for a moment, then went back to his former guide. "Are his words true, 14th Quag?" The Reverend hesitated. He divided his attention between Aaron and Ming-Xue, then bowed even lower. "I did mention the caretakers, Your Grace. I caught myself and made sure to let him know that nothing I said about humans would be accurate. I did ask him to help me conceal my mistakes. I have shamed both him and myself for it." "He was just nervous," Aaron said. "He got me here safely, isn't that what counts?" Ming-Xue took a step toward Quag, but not before giving Aaron a brief look of reproach. "Trust, 14th," she said solemnly. "You have proven that we have your loyalty. Are you worthy of our trust?" Quag didn't give an answer. She took another step and pointed at the left side of his chest, her finger hardly an inch away from touching him. "Do we have your trust?" The question was quiet, almost intimate. Her stare bore down on the prostrated creature with probing intensity. A thundering bass rumble began in Quag's chest. It spread from his center and seeped into the bizarre woods, subtly shaking the feathery leaves about the path. His array of colorful glands grayed, then became the black of the deep sea. Quag rose slightly, so that Ming-Xue's fingernail brushed the fleshy hide beneath his shoulder. The hypnotic sway of his appendages conveyed a single word. "Yes." "So it is done," Ming-Xue intoned. She moved her finger across Quag's skin, and flickering rivulets of mist sprouted from her hand and enveloped them both. The booming rumble was replaced with an agonized screech as the mist violently churned around them. Santana looked on, impassive hawk-like eyes, watching everything unfold. It was over as quickly as it had begun. The thick mist vanished, thinning to strands of smoke that floated away into nothingness. Ming-Xue withdrew her hand and waited. Quag remained where he had been, worn and restless, his appearance unaltered except for the patch of flesh where she touched him. There, a small symbol glowed in gold and fiery orange. 2 oblong circles, flattened and joined at the side to resemble a tumble number 8, a lemniscate of Bernoulli. It was a symbol that Aaron had traced hundreds of times, both in mathematical notation and as idle sketching on random pieces of paper. He was rather fond of it. The lemniscate was seared onto Quag's body, shining in a way that transcended vision. Aaron could sense it in the same otherworldly way he sensed the other humans around him, albeit more faintly. "Rise, Quag Thousand Rivers," Ming-Xue said. "You are no longer of the 14th. You are a human hand, part of a greater whole. You will not bow again." Quag rose as told, the sphere beneath this tangle of tentacles brightening up with additional subtle hues. He reinstated a respectful distance between himself and Ming-Xue. Quag's fear was no more. "You have leave to get all of your former commitments in order," Ming-Xue said. "You may depart at your leisure, but return swiftly. I will have a task ready for you." The newly named Quag Thousand Rivers nodded agreement in his peculiar alien way. He turned to Aaron and nodded to him as well, and to Diego next. He then took off flying towards the exit of the realm, proud and puffed up like a rank-and-file infantryman that had just been promoted to captain. "And that's it?" Aaron wondered. "When does he get the actual reward?" Their ritual apparently finished, Ming-Xue returned her attention to him. "It will not escape you that much is different in this existence, Aaron." She stood at a professorial stance, hands clasped before her as she addressed him in a calm and measured voice. "Grieve not what you have lost, as there is so much more to gain. It will take time, however. Are you ready to learn?" Aaron gave her a blank look. Had she truly just told him to simply forget? She must be kidding, though they take themselves too seriously for it to have been a joke. "When do I get my lightsaber?" he responded. They didn't get the reference, but he didn't care to explain. He didn't care about a great many things at that moment. He didn't care about the odds. He didn't care about what Ming-Xue believed was the truth. He didn't care about the allegedly incomprehensible size of Eternal. He would do what these people wanted him to do. Study, train, practice, research, endure. Whichever was needed to learn how to travel through the afterlife, to visit every corner and turn every stone. He would learn everything as quickly as he could, to the very best of his ability. He needed to. There was a lot of ground to cover, and Alexandra was out there somewhere. Somewhere.